Hi and welcome to the Gemhawks YouTube channel. Today we're going to make Coil Chain Cascade Earrings. Now there's a couple of different variations on the board here. There's a set just here which are 3-turn coils 3 times over, and then I've got one which is graduating, and I'm going to show you how to make the graduating one, but you do have an option to keep all of the coils the same size if you prefer. So I'm going to move this over and then we'll get going. Today I'm going to be working with 1.25mm or 16 gauge wire. It's a nice heavy wire, you can hammer it and you'll get some really lovely shiny finishes on those coils. So for the 2-turn link in our chain, I'm going to start with a 2 1/4 2.25 inch length of that 1.25mm or 16 gauge wire. I flush cut both ends. And I'm going to be using my memory wire finishing pliers, which are a little bit like, I suppose, miniature bail makers. We do want to have some flow to our wire, so let's make that nice and warm to begin with, so that it's more likely to create a nice even coil. Once that's smooth and warm, I'm going to use the small side. If you don't have memory wire finishing pliers, multi-step bail makers will do. The pin I'm using is 2mm. If you only have round nose pliers, I would suggest getting a vernier or a ruler and measuring across and aiming for a 2mm round form in the centre of your coil. I'm going to begin very close to the end of that wire and start moving that around. Now with coils, the slower you go, the neater they are. So we're just going to move that around 3/4 of the way around that circular form and then switch out for some flat facing pliers. I'm using my bent chain nose pliers. And what we're looking to do is to bring that wire around the outside and then over the top of that end, and in that way you end up with a more rounded central aperture. So I'm going to move very slowly all the way around, keeping the second pass of wire on that circular form tight up against the first pass of wire. Once I've got 2 circuits on that little coil, I'm going to bring the wire away at a right angle. So I'm going to pop my chain nose pliers up inside the end of that wire and just bring that away to create something that looks a little bit like a lollipop. Now what we're going to do is to recreate this with an increasing number of coils. That's a 2 coil or a 2-turn coil. So for the next piece I'm using that same wire, 1.25mm gauge or 16 gauge wire, and this is a 3 1/4 inch length, 3.25 inches. Again, I'm going to smooth and warm that through, and both ends have been flush cut. You can see that the wire will change and you'll get rid of any kinks if you just apply a little bit of warmth to it. It will benefit also if you don't wish to hammer your coils later. If you warm this plentifully at this stage, once it cools down, it will be ever so slightly harder than it started. As I mentioned previously, both ends of my wire have been flush cut, so I'm going to repeat the same process but continue an extra turn on my coil. So starting close to the end of that wire, turning around about 3/4 of the way around. If you heard my wrist go bonk, sorry about that. And then we're going to continue with flat facing pliers so that we've got a nice rounded central aperture. And on this occasion, we are going to go not just for a second circuit of wire around that central portion, we're going to go for a 3rd circuit of wire. So the slower and smoother you move, the better and rounder and closer together those wires will be on your coil. So once I've had my 3rd pass of wire from that central starting point, I'm going to draw that wire away at a right angle to create another funny lollipop shape. So I'm going to put these down in a little bit of a row. I'm going to repeat the exact same technique now. For the 4-turn coil, you will need a 4.75 4 3/4 inch length of that 1.25mm or 16 gauge wire. I'm working with raw copper. One of the reasons I love to work with raw copper is that there's no coating for me to accidentally scratch off. If I do nick the surface of the wire anywhere, I can very easily polish it and there's no surface that I need to worry about. Also, it's just a genuinely beautiful wire to work with. And unless you have an allergy, copper is actually quite good for most people. Don't take my word as a medical professional, I am not a healthcare professional. Both ends have been flush cut as with the two previous coils, and we're going to start in exactly the same way by beginning to rotate around a central point, getting around 3/4 of the way, there or thereabouts on that circular form, and then drawing the wire back across. And you'll see that you get a reasonably rounded central point. So I'm going to press really firmly as I draw the wire around, moving somewhere between 1/8 of a turn and 1/4 of a turn at a time. You can move much more quickly if you wish, but what you may find is that the wire will deviate. If you do take your time, your wire will come out in a nice flat disc, and you won't have to overly faff around with it afterwards. So we've got 1 turn, 2 turns, 3 turns. We're going to go again to get that 4th turn now. Once you've got the 4th turn, just bring that wire away again at a right angle and add it to your little cascade of lollipop sticks. So you'll need 2 pieces of wire in each length to create this increasingly sized cascade of coils to create the Coil Chain Cascade Earrings. What I would recommend is doing both of those, so 2 of the smallest with 2 turns, 2 of the 3 turn and 2 of the 4 turn, and then lining them up. The reason I say this is because I like to have the coils on jewellery and earring designs sitting opposite one another. So I can show you with the pair of earrings that has 3, 3 and 3 coils that the spirals move in opposite directions so that there is a symmetry there, like a mirror image. So let's pop those back down. So once you've got these laid out, what we're going to do is lay them out so that all of the coils that are moving, and this is a clockwise, on one side, and then all of the coils moving anti-clockwise on the other side. And then what we're going to do is bring the wire forwards at the point that it leaves the spiral. So one like that, and that's about 45 degrees forwards, like so, about 45 degrees forwards, and like so, about 45 degrees forwards. Now that one's a bit heavy, so it's not going to sit up properly. If you sit the ones that are moving in the opposite direction on the other side and also bring that wire forwards, you won't accidentally have any spirals that are moving in the wrong direction. So it's not the end of the world if they do and you like a little bit of a jumble, but I like them to be opposite to each other. So what I'm going to do now is to grab back in my memory wire finishing pliers. You can of course use your multi-step bail makers or round nose pliers, and this time I'm going to use the 4mm pin. So there's a little extra on this one. What we're going to do is to turn that wire all the way around until it crosses over at the point at which the wire exits from the coil. So there's a little bit of a gap there. You can see the gap just down there, and that gives us an opportunity to just pinch that into position and trim the wire away. There's only a tiny bit of wastage on this one. And what we're going to do is to ensure that that cut end meets the point at which the wire leaves the spiral, or the coil if you prefer. So get that to sit nice and neat. Now the coil and the loop, it's just a simple loop, need to be at 90 degrees opposition to each other. You can see one is flat to the board and one is upright to the board. I'm then going to hammer them. Now I normally use a beautiful chasing hammer, but today, because we're working with quite a small piece, I'm going to use this teeny tiny toffee hammer. Just means that my fingers stay safer. So once you've hammered the loop, and I don't hammer too close to the join, I'm going to now hammer the coil. And it pays to try and put more pressure on the outside of the coil if you are coming down at a bit of an angle, because it means it will push everything into the middle and you won't end up with gappy, baggy coils. If things do come awry slightly, you can very simply pinch those back up and just re-centralise your coil if it comes off true. I'm going to repeat that exact same thing with the other two coils, and then you would do the same with the other side. So in order to put our little cascade of coils together, we're going to start with the largest one, which is the 4-turn coil down at the bottom. Now what we're going to do is to open that simple loop up at the top as if it was a jump ring. So just open half of that until you get that lovely big gap, and then we're going to slide that onto the next size up. So once that's in position, you can close that up, and you will obviously need to make sure that you've put that together with both coils sitting in the correct orientation, so they're both moving in the same direction. Do make sure that that cut end meets the angle change once more, and then repeat with the middle-sized one into the smallest one. So open up as if it's a jump ring, make sure it's facing in the right direction, and then pop the smallest coil into position up at the top, and then make sure that you close that up neatly, that the cut end sits against that angle change. Just going to make sure that everything is nice and strong. And there's your little coil chain cascade. I'm going to add it into these handmade earring findings just by opening up that little loop at the top and sliding that down into position. Give that a bit of a squish to make it nice and strong, and there you have the other half of your 3-piece coil chain cascade earring. I hope that you've enjoyed today's free YouTube tutorial from the Gemhawks YouTube channel. This is a coil chain cascade earring. I think they're really charming, and when I talk about popping scraps of chain into the scrap pot, this is the exactly perfect example of what you can use those scrap lengths of wire to create. So I hope that you have enjoyed today's video. If you're enjoying the content, please do like the video. Drop me a comment, ask for any future tutorials you'd like to see. A subscription really helps me to be seen, as does a little old hype which costs you nothing. Thanks so much for watching. Enjoy the rest of your day. Bye for now.